Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backyard Pet Talk with Shannon Riley. Today, we have a very special guest I'm very excited about. We have the one and only Patricia McConnell. I have followed her since the 90s as I have early dog trainer, and she's an animal behaviorist, an author, a speaker, and just an all-around dog lover. There's so many things that I have learned from her, and I hope you learn as well. And now she also just wrote her first fiction book. She has other books, which we might talk about a little bit, but she had her first fiction book, Away to Me, that is available on pre-order. So you can go to her link, which we will have at patriciamcconnell.com. We will put a link in all the comments area too for you to find it. You can pre-order it. I'm very excited because I already got started a little bit. So it's great. I haven't fully finished it yet, but now I don't want to put it down. Very excited to have you here today. Welcome, Trisha. How are you today?
Well, I'm just really happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Shannon.
It's my honor, and I'm just so excited. And I knew you were writing this book because we reached out a while ago, so I've been kind of waiting for it. In case we have some viewers that maybe are like new to dog training or new to animals, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself? I mean, I know it would be a very long resume, but kind of cap it down to tell us about how you got into animals and how you got into writing and those kinds of things.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I will keep it succinct. I've just always been an animal lover. When I was 5, I didn't have dolls. I had stuffed animals. And I would sit them, I'm 52, and I would sit them in my bedroom and teach them like a trainer. So I guess I've always been an animal trainer ever since I was 5. And I was just really lucky. I mean, I had a whole life before I went back to school. I went back to university when I was in my late 30s. I had a million different jobs, and none of them really made me happy. And I always wanted to work with animals. And I discovered going to an Animal Behavior Society conference that there was this field called applied animal behavior. So I dove into that, studied at the University of Wisconsin, got a PhD in zoology with a minor in psych, and then went on to start a dog training business. And that sort of morphed into being on the radio. I did a national show called Calling All Pets for 14 years with the Wisconsin Public Radio. And that evolved into writing some booklets and then some books, and then speaking around the country and then speaking around the world. And then I got to the point, I mean, I'm old, Shannon. I'm 70, I'm 77. And I got to the point, maybe, 5 or so years ago, it was like, I want to be involved, but, it's not right to see clients anymore. I'm sort of old and slow, but I love writing. I love the writing part of the books that I wrote about behavior. I just thought, what if I wrote fiction? So just on a lark, Shannon, really, I wasn't even doing it to be published for a while. It was just like, I'm just going to do this for fun. And I started writing for fun, and I ended up luckily pairing with an amazing woman and writer, Kat Warren. Some of your readers might know. She wrote What the Dog Knows, about a memoir about training a human remains detection dog. New York Times bestseller, beautifully written. She actually taught writing for years. Anyway, we became partners. So we exchange writings every month. She's also working on fiction. So I just dove into the world of writing fiction, which is a whole science and art and craft unto itself. It's really hard to write good fiction. It's really easy to write bad fiction.
I
didn't want to do that.
I can imagine. And it's funny, as you were talking, I had goosebumps because I never even thought about it. But I also more had stuffed animals than dolls. And I did have them all, and they all had names. And like I chose which ones got to sleep with me, because I couldn't sleep with them all.
I love it.
And when you said that, I was like, I have never recognized that as, and then I got a hamster. Well, we had Staffordshire pit bulls, but they were when I was little, started training when I was in high school, when we got a lab. And I just was thinking, wow, I never thought about how early my animal behavior world
That's
started.
really fun.
Yeah.
I think I've heard that some psychologists talk about ask yourself what you did when you were 5 and 6.
Yeah.
That's what you really want to do. Now, I have no idea if that's actually true, and it works with us, right?
I know, exactly. And now I've wanted to follow that applied animal behavior, couldn't find it, but I'm going to be starting at Virginia Tech probably next year for their online program, because it's always been my dream.
Proud of you.
And I couldn't find a school that worked. I'm in California, but I'm in Southern California, and Davis wasn't going to be a possibility. So I've taken years. And so finally found Virginia Tech, which I think is a good fit for me.
I'm thrilled for you.
I'm very excited to be following in your footsteps. And I also have written a book, but mine is not fiction because I have thought about dabbling in fiction. And you are so right. To write a good fiction, you got to keep track of all the characters and not make mistakes, because good readers will say, this character did this and that doesn't align, or you forgot that you did this in this past. I am fascinated when I watch movies or read books, especially long sequels, things like Hunger Games or Twilight. I'm
Right,
like, how
right.
did she keep track of all, or even Harry Potter? How does she keep track of all those characters long term to make it so they are succinct and true?
It's
Yes.
really a thing. And I found after spending so much time trying to do a good job writing a good story, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to write a good story because that
Mhm.
defines us as humans, really, to me. It's not just language, it's that we are storytellers. We love our stories and we use them to convey information, to escape, but also to learn. So I found after working on A Way to Me, I found myself watching dramas on television and going like, wait, what? You just spent 45 minutes developing this character really, really well, and we're
Mhm.
really into her, and you just had her do something she would never do. What is wrong with you? What are you thinking? And I know why they did it, because they needed a plot device. They needed
Mhm.
something to happen, but they had her do something that she wouldn't have done based on everything they taught us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's a
keeping
fascinating science. It's a lot of talent to do a fiction.
yeah,
So,
and I have to tell you, so the protagonist, if I may, the protagonist is Maddie
yes,
McGowan.
I was just going to tell you to tell us a little bit about the book.
Oh, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
perfect timing then.
Yes.
Yeah, the protagonist is Maddie McGowan. And I will say right up front, I didn't know anything about writing fiction. And I'm happy to say I don't know anything about murder. It's a murder mystery.
Mhm.
So I was like, write what you know. I will have Maddie be an animal behaviorist. She'll live in Wisconsin. So the setting, sort of what she does for a living is familiar. One of the really fun things for me writing this book was here's this character who isn't me, right? But who, I mean, I'm an animal behaviorist. I live in Wisconsin. She does sheepdog trials. She has a border collie, right? There are a lot of similarities. When I first started writing, I very mechanically like, well, she looks really different than me. Her being, she eats junk food and I don't very much. I do some. But like it's a thing if I have a McDonald's. It's like, oh, I get a McDonald's. And she lives on it. But what happened, Shannon, was so cool. I've read about this. Having it happen to you was just exhilarating. Very slowly, Maddie, as a person, as this individual, got clearer and sharper to me. She was like a photograph in a dark room. I don't know if you've ever seen a
Mhm.
photograph develop in a dark room, but
Yes.
there's mush. And then this picture emerges slowly over time. And
Yes.
that's what happened, as I wrote Maddie. So Maddie now is like a friend of mine,
Yeah.
and I've read about it, but it's really intense. And I'm
Yeah.
really fond of Maddie. And
Yeah.
it's so much easier for me now to be like, well, what would Maddie do?
Yes.
Not what would I do, but what would Maddie do?
Right. And as a reader, I have never written fiction, but as a reader of fiction, that's one of the things I love when I start getting into a book is because they almost become like a friend,
Ooh, yeah,
or someone I know, and I'll be, what's going to happen next? And you can't put that book down.
right.
You want to know what's going to happen and do start to relate to some of these characters. And I think you said earlier, fiction we do, that's partly what we like about. We learn something about something. And like I was saying, maybe before we started, I do agility, I do puppy class, I do aggressive dogs, but I've never done herding. I've watched it, but I don't understand it. I learned from the book that a way to me is a cue that you give to the dogs to herd the sheep. Now I'm also learning about another field that I have never had a border collie. I have labs and Jack Russells and other breeds, but now I'm like kind of fascinated even more with the field because I was reading this book. When you develop a good character, like you have, because I've already become interested in Maddie's life and haven't finished the book yet, it's great. And it's awesome to hear from the author's perspective that you also become friends with that character and it helps you
Yeah.
probably write more about her.
Well, the hope, the dream, the goal is all of those things is that this is actually the first book in a trilogy.
Okay, I was going to ask you
First
about
book is
that
A Way to
later.
Me, and I'm already started, although I don't have enough time to really work on the next one as much as I want to, called Come By. Away to me means for the dog to go counterclockwise around the sheep, and come by means to go clockwise around the sheep. It's always from the dog and the sheep's perspective, not yours, not the handler's. And then the third book, I hope, is That'll Do. And we all know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
That means your work is done now.
That is
So that's
great.
my hope. So spoiler
Oh, I
alert,
got goosebumps
Maddie
again.
doesn't die. Maddie can't die.
Yes, exactly.
And, the dogs are also really big characters in the book. And that part was really important to me was, giving an honest a description of who these dogs really are and not getting over my skis, right? And pretending we know what we're thinking. But, I'm a professional dog person. Right?
Exactly.
So I didn't consciously think about it that much because I was so worried about focused on character development and plot and, writing good dialogue, which is very, very hard. Learning the craft of writing about how every word means something. Like, for example, if I may, the title Away to Me, it's not just a cue that tells a dog to go counterclockwise. It's a metaphor for Maddie because Maddie has some stuff, right, in her back. And Maddie pushes people away, but she really wants them to come to her, but she's afraid of that. So Away to Me is also stay away, but come to me. And the farm, Lonely Owl Farm, it's the same metaphor. Owls aren't lonely. Owls are solitary. There's such thing as a lonely owl.
Yeah.
Except Maddie's a lonely owl.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And that's just even makes the story even more awesome to think about all those things you integrated into it. I want to take a second and just ask because I don't know this and I probably other people don't. Where did all the cues for herding come from? Because even That'll Do, instead of finished or all done or, Way to Me, why don't they just say clockwise or counter or clockwise? Who came up with all those phrases and those cues?
Yeah, they came from the border counties, which is where Border Collie came from. Border Collies were developed in the borders, which is sort of on the line, Scotland, England. And these are people who raise sheep, very difficult, hilly land where it wasn't very good land. So it wasn't like the perfect grass, right? The sheep had to disperse a lot to get enough food. But then you had to round them up. You had to worm them. You had to shear them. You had to bring them in, and with their lambs, etc. So you needed a way somehow to manage your sheep. And there were no drones, there were no four-wheelers, right? So those words came from that area of the United Kingdom, and how where did that come from? Where did Away or Way to Me, exactly where did that come from? I'm guessing they might have been Scottish. Now you've sent me on a hunt. Now I'm going to have to
I just thought
out, I should know exactly
it's okay,
where
but
those came from.
Most of our American cues, if we're speaking English or even, kind of makes sense. Sit down, those basic things, even teeter or, walk it of agility. I thought that as soon as I started your book, I thought that was the first thing I thought is, I wonder where those cues came. Now, this is my crazy, brain way. It works because I'm just always fascinated with behavior and all the sports. I love dog sports.
Well, I'm gonna look into that, and then I'm gonna put that somewhere and Come By because
yes,
I love that question.
I think that's great. Now, you also have, we've talked about Maddie does herding and all these things, but she comes into contact with an aggressive dog at the shelter. How does that, because you've also worked with aggressive dogs, I have learned from you over the years with your booklets and your books. How did that come into, and how did your experience interweave with what you had Maddie do? Was it any personal experiences, or was this all fiction and that you brought up with Maddie?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I will say there was no dog. Cisco is the name of the dog we're talking about, German Shepherd. I had no case that was exactly like Cisco, but I had a lot of cases that were very similar to Cisco. So I did work with shelters and I worked with clients who had dogs who were fear aggressive and dangerous. I mean, everybody in our field ends up doing that because that's what motivates people most, right? To go out and get help from a professional. And bless them all, right? For reaching out and not just doing what their grandpa said to do. Something. It's part of the book, part of A Way to Me. It's a hero's journey. It's a drama. Maddie is very stubborn. She stays in her lane, but she's absolutely devoted to dogs. and relates to them a lot because she has garbage in her background. And so she very relates a lot to fear aggressive dogs. Part of the plot is because, this is Maddie's life, is that Maddie sees some clients. She sees these people and that people. So the shelter calls her to come help with this aggressive dog. I have been called to do that, exactly that. It's never been exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
But all of the clients and all the situations that I described that Maddie runs into are ones in general are very similar. I've kept client confidentiality, but I will tell you that my favorite clients were three men who Maddie to herself calls Larry, Daryl, and the other brother Daryl. If anybody's old enough to watch the Bob Newhart show, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, yes.
They're sort of disheveled men who like came from under a bridge, who have this gorgeous dog who's just sweet and lovely, but who also is exceedingly aggressive to other dogs. Mm-hmm. So I very much pulled on my experience as sort of the bedrock setting of this book because, as I said earlier, what was all new to me was just constructing a plot, creating believable characters, and then the whole murder mystery thing.
Right, add a little twist to it.
it was just sort of like that part just happened. Mm-hmm. But there were times, Shannon, I think people listening will appreciate this and can imagine it. There were times I would write something for the plot that Maddie did about a dog. It worked, right? And then I would go back and read it again, and I would be like, I would never have done that. Maddie wouldn't do that. As an animal behaviorist, it's like, wait, no. None of us would have done that. That's not good work, right? Yeah. That's not the right protocol, for this dog. So I would go back and go like, okay, that can't happen.
Okay.
Because I need to keep this real. I really wanted Maddie to be a real example of what the life of an animal behaviorist is. I think I've said this so many times, but I really get the impression that so many people think that our work is equivalent to running through fields of daisies with golden retriever puppies, right?
100%.
Right? You meet them in the airport and they're like, oh, I would love to do what you do. It's like, well, what I just did was sit in an office with a dog who looked like he wanted to kill me, with two people gutted, sobbing, or one of them yelling at the other because they're talking about potentially euthanizing their dog. Okay.
I know, exactly. I mean, that is so true in the animal field in general. Like as a veterinary technician, you get to play with puppies all day.
Right.
And I train puppy class. People say, puppy class. Yeah, puppy class is fun. But then there's also that time when you have the puppy that is 8 weeks old, bad genetics. And you're like, how do I tell this person that this dog is going to be work for the rest of their life and may never be quote unquote normal? You have those. Exactly. I mean, and I get those a lot, or you have the dog that you're like, you don't touch for 6 weeks and you see them weekly or every week. You see them and people are like, what do you mean you don't touch them? Yeah, because I don't want to get bit because they don't want me to touch them.
Because they
don't understand those nuances, things. Or, you teach agility. Yeah, but I also teaching the teeter, which is a very complicated skill to teach without fear, and it's not just go play on all the stuff. People don't understand all that. And
they don't. And one of my hopes of this book, maybe your listeners can help with this because the interest in this book has been all from the dog world, which is great. I mean, I'm incredibly gratified. But wouldn't it be wonderful if people who love mysteries but weren't necessarily dog professionals got into this? Because there is just sort of sideways, there is a lot about canine behavior and what a behaviorist does and what a good trainer does. And, there's also the world of sheepdog trialing, which is very dramatic and very interesting. It's 3 species, for heaven's sakes. Right. And so there's a lot to learn and hopefully enjoy, even if you're not in the dog world.
Maybe even get some, I was just going to ask you, you might be able to influence some potential trainers or potential animal behaviorists, or even influence trainers who are already trainers, but maybe do more traditional methods. I was going to ask you, have you had any experience when you've talked to people? I know it's pre-order right now, but anybody who's talked to it where it's some other trainers have related, like I relate, but they say, I never really thought about training in that. Have you had that yet? And it's a pre-order, so you don't have it out to the big public world yet. Have you had anybody give you those kinds of things like, oh my gosh, Tricia, I really related to this, or I like the way Maddie handled this aggressive dog? Have you had any any of those
I
experiences yet?
love that. I love that question. And you actually answered it yourself, just the question before,
Hmm.
because the thing that stands out the most with all the podcasts and the interviews I've done so far is, I said, it is within the dog world. And when I talk about we don't spend our time running through fields of daisies with golden retrievers, every single person responds as you do. It's like, yes, please let the world know. I mean, and one of the things that I have no idea if the book will help with this, I don't know. But when I first started in this profession, one of the things that hit me really hard was how little respect was given to dog trainers. You know,
Hmm.
our whole field, you know, working with quote pet dogs, there is not enough respect, in my opinion,
Right.
for the work that we do, which
Right.
is very important. We're talking about children's faces being bitten off. We're talking
Mhm.
about people losing their beloved dog because there was some behavior problem that you and I know we could have helped with
Right.
relatively easily, you know, and the family is gutted. Or I mean, I've had clients that got divorced over dogs. You know, I think everybody has. So this is important, serious stuff. Yeah. So one of the things I love about the evolution of our field right now, Shannon, and you're a great example of it, you know, force free, right? Nobody
Mhm.
talked about force free when I was a young person.
Exactly. And when you said, were you talking about we don't get a lot of respect as a dog trainer? There's things where you have to write what's your profession, on forms. And
Right,
I remember early on, I would be like, well, I'm a vet tech because at least that was a licensed, thing.
right,
I'm a
right.
vet tech and slash dog trainer or slash behavior consultant. Cause like, I'm not a behaviorist because I don't have my degree, but I would almost feel now I look at it differently. But early on, I'd be like, well, I'm just a dog trainer,
Yeah,
and
yeah. And
be
I think that's
and
really
it's so
easy to
important.
do.
Now I look at it and my clients, I say, if I wasn't here, your dog could be euthanized, or your puppy wouldn't get this early socialization, or, like I do important things. We all do important things, but it is unfortunately in the world, this hopefully will change that. But to be a good dog trainer, to be a good behavior consultant, to takes a lot of education, continuing to learn. What are we learning? I mean, I remember when we never talked about body language. And then, we didn't
Right,
really look at it.
right.
It wasn't, and then all of a sudden, Sue Sternberg, and all of a sudden they're like this. And we had seminars for hours on looking at tails and
Right,
ears and
right.
mouths. Yes.
Yes, yes.
And
And
now it's kind of blown over where I feel like new trainers sometimes miss that because now we just assume, oh, everybody knows body language. When I'm training trainers, that's still square one.
it
You have
is,
to learn body language.
if I was doing classes again, I would focus, I don't know what percentage, but a massive amount of time on people learning to read dogs. You
Hmm.
know, and yes, we don't know exactly what's going on
Right.
internally, emotionally, right, psychologically, but we know a lot,
Right.
right? And we know that that look means you better pull your hand away,
Exactly.
right? So, and
Exactly.
you know, just circling back a tiny bit, I
Hmm.
just so wanted to say this because nobody's brought this up. One of the things I did very intentionally, a lot of the behavior work, it just sort of happened.
Hmm.
You know, it was so easy for me to write about seeing a client, right? Because I've been
Right.
doing it for, 30 years. But one of the things I did intentionally is that Maddie McGowan is not just, I mean, she's a PhD animal behaviorist, but again, that doesn't necessarily get you very much respect. And I can give you examples of that. But she's also short.
Hmm.
She's a little pudgy. And she specifically is very aware that she has to fight to be listened to.
Hmm.
She pulls her hair back and she puts on glasses. If she
Hmm.
talks to the cops, she puts her glasses on. You know,
Hmm.
it's just some way of saying, I am a person. I am here. I am
Right.
relevant.
Right.
What I say matters. Do not dismiss me. Because women in general, as we all know, so often get dismissed just because we're women.
Right.
And so many trainers are women, and we work with pet dogs. And
Right.
the word pet, I mean, it was a slur.
Yeah.
The word
Yeah.
pet was a negative connotation of a nasty, spoiled brat kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
um,
it's so true. And one thing you also talked about, which I've seen in the field, and you can kind of tell me if you've seen this too, because you've met people, but you have Maddie, mostly her family is her dogs, and she's fairly introverted. She doesn't have a lot of
Yes.
friends, and she's a
Yep.
introverted person. It's interesting because I didn't know this about myself because I do things like this and I can teach classes. So everyone always assumed I was a very extroverted person. Well, when I started learning more about myself, I said, but I don't fill my cup that way. If I go to a veterinary conference or a dog training conference, I'll go do social. I have to get a room by myself. I used to room with friends, and then I would go, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. To fill my cup, I need quiet, alone, reading music, like away from people. And as I started to share that, because everybody just assumes I'm extroverted because they
Mhm.
meet me and I'm like, yeah, I can do that. But I learned the phrase extroverted introvert. Maddie is introverted. Is this what your experiences is, or is this what you decided Maddie should be just to fit the character? What is your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, first, same. I'm exactly you. I
Mhm.
am, and my older sister, Wendy Barker, was a brilliant writer and poet who gave brilliant readings. I mean, she was just a star. She would read some of her work, and I mean, the room just went, people stopped breathing. She was so good. She was a dramatist. I mean, she was an amazing, amazing performer. And she was incredibly introverted. After these brilliant performances, she was exhausted. And I am very much like you, Shannon. I love talking. I'm loving doing this right now. I love speaking. I'm pretty good at it and I love it,
Mhm.
but it takes so much energy. And now I have the universe's joke on me is that I have Epstein-Barr chronic fatigue syndrome
Oh,
and
yes.
I have ADHD. That's like, the trickster. That's like the joke, right? Right. So,
Huh?
but it's not right to see clients anymore. Extra challenging for me to figure out how to balance my energy. But I think you're right. I think so many people who are drawn to animals, I don't know, I've never thought of it this way, but they don't talk,
Right.
right?
I mean, there are some people, and I've met some trainers that are too introverted. They're introverted introverts. So they're not actually end up not being good teachers. It's not that they're not knowledgeable. It's
Right.
not that they don't have the skills, but because they're so introverted, they can't get their message across. But those are people who work good in the shelter where they're not working with
Yes.
clients and they're just working with the dogs. But I used to think I was like the weird one because I'll speak at a conference and then I don't want to do the social thing afterwards. And I'd be like, maybe something's wrong with me. And then I learned, well, speaking, I was giving my everything and I was emptying my cup or, teaching or whatever. And then I go back and have to rest or seeing an aggressive dog because you are keeping track of the dog, the human, if there's a kid in the room, yourself. It's a lot to manage. And that does also be a piece of having this personality that I think you're portraying in Maddie in some of these ways too.
I remember you're making me think of old times. I remember being at conferences with Ian Dunbar, who
Mm-hmm.
was really good to me, by the way. He was really helpful. I helped just being supportive about me getting started.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an extroverted extrovert.
Yes.
So he would speak all day long. And then he would play pool soccer or whatever
Yes.
all night long until 3 or 4 in the morning and then get up and speak all day long. And I'm like, that was great. It was great having dinner with you, although I was really tired after being, at a seminar all day. Like, I'm going to go back to my room and read,
Right.
my
I remember
novel.
meeting him at some early APDT conferences and then him saying, come have dinner with us and have a beer. And I was young and excited to be invited to sit to the table with Ian Dunbar. So I would do
Sure, of
it. And then
course.
I would be like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. And then later I have chronic Lyme disease, which I didn't get diagnosed for quite a long
Oh,
time.
wow.
And
I'm so
so
sorry.
that's kind of how I learned, when I'm really sick, I'm not extroverted, but it's not because I'm changed my personality. It's just that when the disease is in its full effect, which right now, luckily, knock on wood, it's totally in remission. But
I'm
if it really,
so
everything's even harder. So with you, with Epstein and stuff, when it starts to kick up, you need that rest even more and
It's almost the
taking care of
silver
ourselves.
lining of these challenges, these medical challenges we have, right? I call them medical adventures. Kind of a silver lining because it forces you to learn more about yourself and sort of
Right.
what your limits are and what tires you, what, as you said, fills your cup. I mean, I think that's great. We don't want other people to get these medical adventures. We absolutely
Right.
do not. But it's a good reminder of how important it is to look within yourself because I think dog trainers and behaviorists, and vet techs and shelter
Yes.
workers. There's so much pressure on us to be there because there are crises that happen over and over and over again. The hoarding case comes in at the shelter, or, somebody calls and says to the behaviorist or the trainer, it's like this dog's going to be euthanized tomorrow. Can you
Right.
please see me tonight? Right.
Right.
Because of the bite that happened. I mean, there are
Yeah.
crises all the time, and learning how to, we're also helpers, right? We want to
Right.
be there. We're helpers. And I think one of the things, and I love that sometimes you see this at conferences, I think is really important. There need to be sort of self-care sections of conferences, is like, how do you deal with the challenge of your profession?
I did a seminar it was APDT for compassion fatigue. This was
Hey,
before COVID, and now it's on my website. And I have that webinar free all the time. It's always free.
oh, that is so good of you.
So dog trainers, vet techs, veterinarians, even nurses, anyone who's a caretaker, compassion fatigue is real. When you also have an introverted personality and you give too much, or if you have, as you call these medical adventures, compassion fatigue sets in even more. It's one of my things. And I totally agree with you. I submit to talk to other conferences. I'm like, look, I already have seminar. I have it ready. It gets denied so often, but it really should be out more. I think it needs to be out there more. Conferences, it just
Good for
isn't
you.
sexy. It's not sexy enough to sell tickets, so they don't always,
I would,
accept it.
play with changing the title.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
We can talk about this some other time. But
Exactly.
yeah,
But
but
anyway,
really,
but
because
that's,
I
I
think it's
think,
really important, and let's wordsmith and see if changing the title makes a difference.
that would be wonderful. We could talk forever. Obviously, we have so many things in common, and I can't wait to finish the book. I've been reading it, and it's so fun. And I'm having such a fun time learning about herding dogs and then seeing the behavior part of things. But then Maddie's adventures and the murder. I love murder mysteries. And then obviously, I love dogs. So I'm really excited to finish it so I can see how it ends.
Thank you.
And anyone who's listening, it's A Way to Me and Patricia McConnell. It is on pre-order. You can go to patriciamcconnell.com to check it out. And we'll have all of these links in there too, so you can find it. It comes out.
It's February 24th. And if you go to my website, again, it's patriciamcconnell.com. If you go there, there's also a list of the speaking events I'm doing around the book. So I'm doing a book tour in Wisconsin. I'm doing a tour in Texas. Who knows what else will happen. But what I absolutely adore is being at a bookstore and somebody coming up and saying, I heard you on Shannon's podcast.
Backyard Pet Talk.
Yeah.
Exactly. Follow Patricia's social media because you could win a free signed book. I mean, all of the things on Facebook and Instagram, all those social media,
Thank
follow
you.
those. It's also a great way to know what she's up to. Thank you so much, Patricia, for I'm so honored and to have you here. I'm so happy for your first fiction. Looking forward to the trilogy to come out. Everybody check out A Way to Me. It's a really fun book. Thanks again, Trish, for being here.
Thank you so much, Shannon. It was just a joy being here. And thanks for all the good work you do. It's
Well, thank
really
you.
important.
Thank you.